Media's anti-Trump election narrative is being described as a mixture of wishful thinking and propaganda. One America's Caitlin Sinclair has more.
Dan Gaynor, boy, do our viewers want to hear from you. At this point, Dan, it is undeniable. Lie after lie after lie by the mainstream media. We have seen it for the past 5 years, and here it continues. These were intentional lies told about President Trump, told about his supporters, and then we had our lovely pollsters. Your reaction?
For the polling across the board to have been this bad, there were people saying leading up to this, saying, if the polling is wrong, and clearly it was. I mean, indisputably, wrong. No matter how it turns out, whether Trump ends up winning in this fight or Biden, it was a close race, and the press pretended it wasn't. So there was a time not that long ago, maybe 20 years ago, where if you had polling all saying one thing, but all the journalism saying something else, where you look at every event around the country and there's tens of thousands of Trump supporters turning out at all these events. Journalists would have gone out into the heartland and interviewed people and gone back to their bosses and saying, there's an emotional gap.
70 million Americans have shown their support for President Trump. Of course, none of that was reflected. And these voters that turned up this time, they include unprecedented numbers and percentages from groups that are historically not favorable towards Republicans. We had groups like African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, and the major media outlets, they refused to bring that narrative into the spotlight. They actually ignored it, in fact.
Well, they ignore it because they can't address it, because if they address it, then that forces them to come to terms with the fact that, Trump ran very, engaging with minority groups campaign. You saw it if you watched the Republican National Convention. Trump reached out to African Americans more than any president pretty much in my lifetime. He reached out to Hispanics. He reached out to the gay community. The media wanted to pick not just Trump. They wanted to pick all of his supporters. 70 million people who voted for him. They wanted to pick them all as racist, sexist, xenophobes, as opposed to people who simply disagree about the future of the country.
Right. So how many times can you call someone racist? How many times can you call a party racist? How many times can you call our president a liar before people start to just believe you?
Well, I think you get two results for that. It's one of those decision matrix situations where if you're predisposed to believing that or hating Trump or hating conservatives or being liberal, then you believe it all. But the flip side is the people who don't believe it. Every time you hear something, no matter what it is, you disbelieve automatically. So the press that had already really abandoned any sense of neutrality or covering everybody in America, just covers what it wants and who it supports. Now it's lost credibility with 1/3 of the country completely.
Do they even care about credibility is the question, because we now know this was no accident. It didn't happen overnight. Dan, where do you see this all going in the next week or so?
I mean, clearly the media are unified in trying to push through a Biden victory. Mm-hmm. And they will do everything they can to reinforce that with images of a calm Biden and images of, Trump's criticizing, he has no evidence, so they won't show any evidence. That's their solution. Even if there is evidence, they won't show it. Ergo, he has no evidence. So they're going to, so I think it's very obvious he goes to court.
No evidence. I think every millennial can pull up video evidence on their smartphones right now. Dan Gaynor, thank you so much.